Hey there YouTube, Chris here from CP Whiskey Creek and N-Scale, and in this video I'm going to show you the how and why I added a scrapyard to my layout. So let's get started. At the 2024 Springfield show, Otter Valley Railroad announced that they were going to do an N-Scale run of their trash and scrap gondolas. Now, even though I model in the modern era, these didn't immediately jump out as something I needed or wanted just because I don't really have anywhere for them to go. Every time I was out rail fanning, I don't think I ever really noticed the trash and scrap gondolas until after that announcement. So I think it was actually the night of, while I was still in Springfield. I went out for dinner one night to the Steaming Tender restaurant, and the CSX main line runs right beside the restaurant. So while I was waiting for my dinner, here I had a train running right beside me. A few months later, I was rail fanning in Hagersville, and the CN has their Hagersville sub local running through there. And again, I started noticing these AIM cars for scrap metal. And then a few months later, I was in Hamilton, Ontario at Stewart Yard when I noticed a massive line of these AIM scrap metal cars. Now, of course, Hamilton has quite a few scrap metal dealers there, but now I'm seeing these things everywhere. So I decided that I definitely needed to add some type of scrap metal service, and what sort of really inspired me was as we were on the GO train heading into Toronto one day, I think it's in Burlington, there's quite a few scrap yards that are right beside the GO train main line, and there's even one of them that has a small little siding coming off of it. So I started playing with Google Maps and just sort of taking pictures every time I went by on the GO train, just getting some inspiration because I knew I needed to add this somehow, somewhere into the layout. Now, since I've decided to add the industry and I placed my order for my scrap gondolas, then I had to figure out where this was actually going to go. So after going back and forth of different spots in the layout, and I'm actually surprised I couldn't find any before picture, and clearly I got struck by such ambition, I started ripping out some track and adding a switch in there before I documented anything. But I found a little spot in and around where my siding for the lumber yard was. Now, eventually I'm going to end up moving that shed sort of overhang area for covering some of the lumber to create some more room, but I figured out that this was a pretty good spot to add in here, and it really wasn't taking away from any other aspect of the operations. Checking out a lot of pictures for inspiration of other scrapyards, I noticed one trend that everyone seems to have an excavator. The ones that I saw typically had some type of magnetic end as opposed to the bucket, but I found this one on eBay from an overseas seller, and it was in N-Scale, so I ordered that to come in, and it's going to be good enough. I added, using some of the Tamiya Panaline weathering stuff, then I was able to at least dirty it up a little bit, because I mean, you can't have a clean excavator at a scrapyard. So again, it's not exact because it doesn't have the right bucket at the end, but for me it's definitely good enough. Next up came time to remove that lumber shed, because that was right in the way of where I was going to be putting a lot of the scrapyard. So once that came out, then I used this opportunity to also patch up a few spots that I missed. For the groundwork that I originally had laid down, I used a shade of grout, and I guess with the way that I had put the foam down, there was some gaps in the foam which were quite noticeable. So I decided to also use this as an opportunity to lift up some of the track and fill in all these holes and put the new grout down again to patch all that up, just so everything looks the way it's supposed to look. So I'll give you a little update on how the scrapyard is going. And starting sort of left to right, this pile here, I got this inspiration from, I believe it's Rick, and he's from SoCal Scale Models. And he does a lot of operations and switching, and he's got a scrapyard that he ended up using spare parts from his scale models, so like tanks and planes. And so I have a bunch of spare parts, like you can actually see right there, that's part of a M109 barrel, and there's all kinds of just cut off screws and just random things. So I sort of cut it all together. At first when I did it, I made it way too big, especially for N scale. It wasn't proportional. So I scaled it down and redid it, but I'm much happier with how this pile of just scrap metal looks. And I even included in here, if you recall, if you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, I got some 3D printed stuff. This delivery van was supposed to be a UPS van. It wasn't cured properly, so it actually fell apart. So you can sort of see how, so once it finished drying, then I'm just sort of including it as part of the scrap pile. This pile here, this is basically just scrap paper. So I took the paper from the shredder and glued it on top of a small little scrap piece of foam, Mod Podged it all together, and then spray painted it with a shiny spray paint. Anyways, I'm waiting for the Otter Valley scrap metal cars to come in, and so I might sort of do crate loads for them when they come in of some more of the smaller parts that I have. So I still have some spare tiny parts that I'm going to create a load for that. And then the gondolas, I'll probably actually do the scrap metal ones, so then I have removable loads for those. And then back here, this one I actually found, if you're nerdy enough, then you might sort of recognize what it is, but in passing, it's just sort of another scrap pile. But what that is I found a 3D print STL file, and I sent that off to my library, and they printed it off. I had to scale it down because it's actually designed for tabletop gaming. So I scaled it down so it was a little bit better for N scale. And yeah, I printed that off and then worked through making it's called a scrap space junk pile or something like that, or space scrap pile. So obviously we know what franchise that's from, but I thought it was kind of cool to sort of include that as part of my my layout. So a little subtle nod to some other level of nerdery that I enjoy. In here, I got these scrap bins from Phil's Model Train Store, and so he 3D printed those, and I put in, these are again sort of, I think they're actually machine guns of some type, so they've been cut down and placed inside there, so they're scrap metal bins. And then also from Phil, I also have these, it's basically just a pile of washer, dryer, what else is in there? Oh, a fridge, looks like an oil tank. So just sort of made another pile of scrap metal there for that. And then what I'm going to do is sort of take a step back. I'll be doing the fence line here and then across the back here, and that will create a separation from the lumber yard here. And then it's not available, or sorry, and it's not done yet, but right here is going to be the mobile office. So that's out in the garage right now drying. So the fence line will come up and then go across the back there. And then whether or not I'll put a gate in here, not sure. And then coming around behind here, I've run out of this fence. So I'm probably just going to put like a chain link fence to close in this side here. This fence here, this is the Woodland Scenics product. It's kind of neat because it's already painted, it's already sort of weathered. And then what I've done is I've added some leftover decals that I had from Circus City. So these were decal set that I got to model up some rolling stock, and some of them are left over, so they ended up on some of the fencing, as you would typically see, especially around a scrapyard. So I'm going to install those along here and along the back there, and then get this sort of closed in, and yeah. So this gives you an idea of what it looks like on that side. What I'm going to end up doing here is probably like some type of chain link fence here and have that open. So obviously we're open for business, and probably actually creating some type of dirt road. I know this is sort of more like a gravel road that connects the scrap yard to the lumber yard and then away from this area. Because that's one thing that you kind of find is sometimes we put in industries and there's nothing that really connects to it. There's no sort of rhyme or reason. So I want to sort of help create that story, right? So to get to the lumber yard, or sorry, get to the scrap yard, you drive past the lumber yard into maybe the sketchy part of town. So that is what we're looking at right now. This I might put in another chain link fence here and then have that sort of open. I know that some people do like fencing that you can actually open and close. I'm not sure if I'm going to go to that stage where you have to actually open and close it to switch here. And then obviously the chain link fence will close off down the last end of this. And then this area here, which is basically currently a storage area, this will just end up being probably some scenery, maybe some more trees and whatnot. So yeah, there's how things are coming along so far. Now I've got the chain link fence added in as well. I finished up the mobile trailer office as well as a porta potty, and both the porta potty and the trailer came from Phil's Train Layout. And finally, the last step for this area is the electrical. I'm not a huge fan of soldering. I'm not really that good at it, but I finally sat down and was able to focus on that, get some soldering done, get the feeder wires for both the lumber yard as well as the scrap yard added in. Because I'm using a Pico turnout in this section here, I also had to add in some of those insulated joiners in certain spots just because they're kind of finicky like that. They're really good turnouts, but I just find you have to deal with them electrically a little bit differently. So now I can, at least with ease, not have to worry about any whether it be a short or losing power. I can drop off a full load down to the lumberyard, leave those behind, and then move the gondolas into position in the scrapyard. And I should have enough room for the Otter Valley gondolas as well as these lower ones. The only two things I really need to worry about at some point in the probably distant future is adding a little bit more grout in and around the track work, as well as possibly putting in those gates. But I want to make sure that everything is running smooth before I get into any of that stuff. So I have everything laid and everything in place the way I like it. So I'm going to be able to use the area operationally, drop off and pick up cars, and patiently using that with air quotes, wait for the new cars from Otter Valley, and then this area will be complete. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.